Hi, I'm Danny and these are my Diecast Disasters, and in this video I'm going to be customizing this Hot Wheels Desert Force. So this is one of the super rigs. Hot Wheels has been making this particular model since 2015. So just taking it out of the package there. You can see it consists of the truck and a trailer. And it comes with the Hypertruck pickup. The Hypertruck came out in 2012 and it's like a modified, chopped up pickup version of the 2005 Reverb from the Accelerators series, but none of that really matters because I think it's pretty hideous and we're not going to be using it. And I'm also going to be taking off the trailer here and putting that aside. We're not going to be using that either. Maybe I can use it in some other future project. And so here is our tractor. A cool beefy looking truck with big wheels. Kind of slopes back at the rear there, which I quite like. So we're going to turn it into a hauler. We need something to haul around, and it's going to be this Hot Wheels Ford Torino Talladega. This is a 69 Torino, and Hot Wheels have been making this model since 2008, and I think this green flame version was 2017. Okay, so that's what we're going to be working with. Let's crack into it. We'll start by taking apart the truck. So there's two metal posts and one plastic one at the rear there. Be careful with the plastic posts because it's easy to overdo it when you're drilling them out. So now I can take it apart. There's the chassis and the wheels. Not really much to this model. Then there's the interior and the rear. And the windscreen. It's a yellow. It's okay though, it's not like a dark tint. And the cab casting. So here I'm going to use some hot water in a jar and some caustic soda to remove that chrome off of the interior section. So just mixing up a spoonful of the caustic soda, and then I can drop it in my chromed plastic, and after a minute or two all of the chrome will be gone. Then I can tip that caustic soda down the drain and rinse it all off. Next I'm going to use some paint stripper to take the paint off of the casting. Just paint that on there, use my forceps to hold it, makes it easy, and then all the paint will peel off and I can wash it away with some water. Here it goes. And next I'll use a wire brush on my Dremel and clean it up a bit further. Get rid of the oxidation and any scraps of paint that might be on there. Right, back to the middle section, and you can see there's a fifth wheel on the back there, and I don't want that because I'm going to be putting the ramp set up on there. So you can see it's sort of hollowed out where that fifth wheel pops up. So I'm going to fill that in with some epoxy putty. Just knead that up. And then I can fill it up. And once that goes hard, I'll be able to grind down the fifth wheel and flatten it out. So making sure it's packed in there and filling up all the gaps. Then I can leave it for about half an hour till it's fully cured. And then I'm going to use a small sanding drum on my Dremel to remove it. Oh, and I'll try to make sure I don't gouge the side of it out any more than that. Right, so there's the bulk of it off, and then I can use a file to smooth down any rough bits. So there we go, that fits onto the chassis there. And then the cab with all the paint stripped off of it will go back on the front there like that. Right, so now I'm going to need a ramp for the back of it. So before I took the truck apart, I scanned the side and top angles of it, and then I could put those in Photoshop and use them to make a guide for my 3D app, so I could model this ramp. And so this should fit nicely on the back. I'll print this out on my resin printer. So here it is once I've printed it out and cleaned it up. And this should fit nicely on the back of my truck there. There we go, that looks to be fitting pretty good. So I'm going to use some thick super glue to glue it on. I had to glue on a little patch of thin styrene at the rear there, just to fill in a lower area. And then using the thick super glue to glue it on, and once that had set, I used some more of the thick super glue to fill in any gaps and sanded them down. And here it is, with the deck glued on, and I've given it a coat of black primer. Back to the cab now. I'm going to paint it. I'm going to paint it yellow, so I'm going to start out with some white primer, and then a couple of coats of nice yellow. Then I've made some decals to stick on the side of it. Quite small there, but they say Merles, we move cars. So I'll apply them, just using some water and a cotton bud. And while I'm applying those, I'll just take a moment to welcome my latest 2 Patreon supporters. So the first is Dash Drones. Thanks heaps, Dash Drones, for the support. And also Diecast Media Network. Thanks heaps for the support as well. And both of these are YouTube channels, so go and check them out. Maybe throw them a sub. Diecast Media Network used to be Flying Valiant, so heaps of interesting builds on that channel. And a big thanks to all my other Patreon supporters. Thanks so much for the support. This really helps out. I actually used Patreon support to get my 2 printers, which I use in just about every build I do now. Right, so now the decals are all dried. I'm going to use a sponge and some German red brown and rust texture paints just to apply a little bit of rust chipping. Not very much, just a little bit here and there. I don't want the cab here to be too rusty. And I'm going to finish it off with some dark weathering powder. I think I'm using an oil stain one here. Could use a black one. Just very lightly here and there to help give the truck a grubby look. And then once I was happy with all of the weathering on it, I sealed it with a clear, I think it was a matte clear. It's kind of a satiny matte though. And back to that middle section with the ramp. So over that black primer, I give it a nice base coat of silver. And then I've got a couple of these rust washes. I'll start by covering the whole thing with a light rust wash. There we go. And then once that had dried, I did the same with the dark rust wash. I'm not really being careful or anything, trying to apply it sort of unevenly. Just want to get a base rusty colour happening. And once this had dried, I'm going to add some more rust texture. This is quite a dark brown rusty paint. I'm just applying that all over with a sponge. And here's how that looks after it's dried. So that's our base rusty colour for the ramp. Then I've masked off the pipes there. And I use an airbrush to paint all of that rear section in the same yellow as the cab. It's not a thick coat, you can still see a bit of the rust poking through under there. And next I take some fine sandpaper, a little bit of water, and I'm going to sand back some of that yellow paint layer, exposing the rust underneath. And after the sanding, I'm going to use the sponge to apply a bit more rust coloured paint here and there for some extra chipping. And I'm applying quite a lot on the ramps where the wheels would go up and be wearing it out. Alright, there we go. There's the ramp section nicely weathered up. Now I can take off that masking, and I detailed the rest of it with silver and some black wash, and I just detailed the interior of the truck in black. And I'm just going to apply a little bit more of the dark weathering powder around the yellow ramp, just to match the grime on the cab. And I better not forget to detail that winch rope there. Here's the chassis. This was also given a base coat of silver. Then I hit it with a black wash, just to darken it up a little bit. And then I used a sponge to apply some rust. So both of those sections we've finished with some matte varnish. Okay, here's some new wheels that I've 3D printed. You can see the old ugly ones. And I've printed some nice new chunky ones. So I've given them a base coat of black, and then I used a brush to detail the rims in silver, and now I'm going to put a black wash over them to darken them up a little bit. The black washes aren't as dark once they've dried as they are when I'm applying them. There we go, there they are after they've dried. And I finished them with a clear coat. And so not a whole heap of pieces in that truck. Here they all are. There's the windscreen. I didn't have to do anything to that. So I'll just have to assemble it. The deck and interior go onto the chassis there. And then I can put the windscreen in. I can get it to go in there. There it goes. And now that fits on the front. It's quite a tight fit. I just sort of squeeze it in past the ramp there. There we go. That's all holding together nice and tight. So now I just had to put the wheels on. I cut out some little axles, and then I didn't actually film myself gluing the wheels on. But that's okay, because we can wait till the end to see how it came out. And now we'll move on to the Torino. So there's 2 posts holding that together. Just drill those out. Now I can take it apart. There's the base with the wheels in it. And the interior. And a windscreen and the body casting. This car looks pretty cool like it is, so I'm just going to rat it out a bit with a paint job. So again, I'll start out using a paint stripper to remove the paint off of this casting. There's the paint gone. Now I'll get rid of that oxidation and stuff with the wire brush on my Dremel. So it's looking nice and shiny and clean. I'll drill and tap the posts so that I can put it back together again with a couple of little screws later on. There we go, all cleaned up and drilled and tapped. I'm going to take the old wheels and axles out of the base here. And I've 3D printed some new wheels. These ones have got separate tyres and rims, so they'll be quite easy to paint. These were just from Thingiverse, or the 3D models were, and I've printed them on my resin printer. There's all sorts of wheels for Hot Wheels and Matchbox and all sorts of things like that on there. It's all free to download. To paint the Torino, I start out with a base coat of silver. I also hit the inside with some black there. Then I gave it all a light, spurty coat of Vallejo rust texture. And I'm going to go all over that with some dark rust wash. And so here's how that's looking once it's dried, and I've hit it with a coat of clear as well just to help toughen it up. So that's my base rust coat, and then I hit the whole car with a couple of light coats of white. So again, it's not a heavy coat of paint, you can still see the rust underneath it slightly. Then I made up a really thin cream, and I just sprayed that lightly over the top as well. So I've got a sort of white faded cream paint job. And then I'm going to take some fine sandpaper again. It's 1200 grit, not 200 grit. And I'm going to sand back that top layer of white and cream and expose the rust underneath. So I'm using some water and I'm using the sandpaper really lightly because you want to try to avoid sanding off the rust as well. And then you can remove the excess paint you've sanded off with a damp piece of cloth or tissue there. And I'll just carefully keep sanding back the white until the whole car's done and I'm satisfied. And so here's how it's looking now after, well, if it gets in focus, after sanding back the white. Here I'm using a fine brush and some black wash to do pin washes around the door and panel lines, the lines around the bonnet, etc. So trying to pretty much just get the wash in the panel lines because I don't want black wash all over the white paint job that I gave it. And then once that had dried, it was back to using a sponge to add a little bit more rust chipping. I'm using some lighter rust colours, more orangey on this top layer of rust. And here's how it's looking after that final application of rust is all dried. And just for a final touch, I'm going to apply a little bit of this green weathering powder here and there. And then I finished all of this with a nice coat of that satiny matte clear. Here's the base after I've used the water and caustic soda technique to remove the chrome off it. I gave it a base coat of silver, and then I airbrushed some Vallejo rust texture underneath. I'm going to put some of the dark rust wash on that rear panel there. And then I mask off the rear bumper and just use a sponge to apply a little bit of the white onto that rear panel between the rear lights. Then I use some silver and a black wash to finish detailing the rear there. And also some black wash on the front grille and underneath. And I painted the rear lights with clear red. And here's some little license plates I've printed out just on normal paper. And I'll use a little tiny bit of PVA glue to apply those. Here are the wheels I printed, so I've painted the tyres black and the rims in silver, and they just fit quite snugly together. here's the interior. I just painted that black and then detailed the seatbelt buckles and gave it a white dry brushing just to bring out the details. Okay, so now I'm going to put the wheels on. I've cut out some little axles here. And I just use a little bit of thick super glue to glue the wheels onto the axles. Not really worrying about this being a roller because it's going to be sitting on the back of that ramp anyway. Right, there's those wheels in place. Now I've just got to assemble the rest of it. So the windscreen goes in, and then the interior, and then I just have to snap on the base there. It's a bit of a tight squeeze with those big fat wheels at the back. And I finish it off with a couple of little button head screws to hold it all together. And so there's all the hard work done. I just need to put my Torino in position on the ramp on the back of my hauler. And I can take some photos of the finished project. Before we do take a look at that though, we'll take a quick look back at what we started with, our Desert Force truck and the Ford Torino Talladega, both from Hot Wheels. Just before I go, a big thanks again to my Patreons. Thanks heaps for supporting the show. Thanks heaps to you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more similar content, remember to subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. Comment down below and let me know what you think. And take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.